Knockback, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Knockback. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Moriarty with his little poof of hair sticking out of his hat, as always. Now, is that's the look?
I don't what the poof? No, I could just tuck that.
I don't mind it one way or the other. I'm just like, is that the look?
Is that better though? Like the part? That's a weird.
Yeah,
look.
I don't know. Why don't you pull it forward? Pull the whole hat forward. Pull the whole hat forward.
Pull it forward a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. What's wrong with that?
That's okay. I like
it. You look like a Muslim now. Look at you. Not with the whole hat, but just that with your head down like that. You know.
Who's the Martin Short character with the hair?
Martin Short character,
right?
With the
He's
hair.
got the big lick of hair in the back, like the cow lick. I think it's Martin Short, right? Was that an SNL?
Dude, why doesn't my fucking mouse ever work? Jesus Christ!
You gotta use a stylus pen, man.
Come on. Dagan has this set up on his computer that is insane. Like in the times I've had to use Dagan's computer, I don't know if it's still true, but Dagan doesn't have a mouse.
No, I haven't used a mouse in 20 years.
He uses a stylus pen. And since I'm inverted when I use the y-axis.
Oh, that's right. You do that.
You were like, oh, it's not that hard. You insisted on me doing this. I'm like, can I please just have a mouse or something?
It takes a day. Yeah. It takes one day to get acclimated. But that's a hard 8 hours. It's a hard earned 8 hours. But if you do it, that's what I remember doing. I remember because I used to draw with the mouse early on in my career. And I just took that one day. I remember I was in-house somewhere, a little animation studio in Reading, Pennsylvania or something. And I was like, I'm just doing this today. I don't even care if I get behind schedule, if I don't hit the deadline. And it was a tough day. It was frustrating, but I learned how to use it. And now we just, we do it right on the screen, right on the Cintiq monitor, which is over here. But yeah, man, I can't even go there anymore.
That's so interesting. I'm looking up Martin Short big hair. Is it the one where he does the mohawk thing?
Is it Ed Grimley?
I'm not seeing anything.
Right? Is that? Hold on. I don't want to take too much time up on this, but I was just thinking of a character with hair. Let me look up Ed.
The only Martin Short character I ever think about is Jiminy Glick.
Yeah, Ed Grimley. Here it is.
Oh, okay.
Fictional character created and portrayed by Martin Short.
Let me see. Ed Grimley. I don't think I even know. God damn it.
He's got like the really high-waisted pants with the plaid shirt.
Oh, yeah, I see. That's what I was thinking. Like, yeah, it looks like a little mohawk style thing. It's like a...
That's really what I got going on. It's not even a cowlick in the back. Grimley. It's the thing in the front. Oh, I got to stop with the Ed Grimley.
Ed Grimley is an excessively cowlicked, voluble, hyperactive man-child who's obsessed with banal popular culture, particularly Wheel of Fortune and its host.
Right, and he always says, I must say, right? Doesn't he always?
I don't remember. I really don't remember. This was during his SNL years. I really don't remember like what the actual nature of it was. The completely mental misadventures of Ed Grimley is an American animated television series.
That's right. It was a cartoon.
1988.
Dude, I just want to tell everybody out there, I don't want to brag, right? I'm not trying to like, I don't know. I'm not trying to like float our own boats here, but it's Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. We're recording this on Thanksgiving. That's how much we love you guys. Kyle, I just got the turkey in the oven, right? Oh, I got 4 or 5 hours. It's like, it's
some
fine.
This is some segue. Yeah, good.
But listen, this is what I wanted to tell you.
Yeah.
Because I have severe turkey pressure right now. And Helene's like, literally like a couple hours ago, she's like, literally, it's the only thing I ask you to do. Like, calm down. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? We have 15 people coming to the house. And the turkey... Even though, look, let's be honest, not a single person, I'm not talking about my family, I'm talking about in all of Thanksgiving this year. Not one person is looking forward to the turkey. It's all the other stuff.
Right, exactly.
Right? But the turkey, for some reason, we insist on it being the center of the table. It's the center of the meal. And if it's not right, it's a lot of pressure. So I woke up really anxious. There's a lot of weight off the shoulders just getting it in the oven. But when I was prepping it this morning, dude... It has this little, so I'm taking out all the innards and the turkey neck and everything, but we don't use that stuff. Just chuck it, right? There's like a little plastic template in there, like a little bit of like a scaffolding, I guess, to help keep, it bounds the turkey drumsticks together. And then I guess it's intended to keep the shape of the turkey. So you got to rip that thing out, right? So got this little plastic bit in there and I'm trying to get it out and it won't come out. And finally I realized, it's just a little bit frozen in. The turkey's not all the way thawed inside. So I just give it a yank
Oh.
A big turkey squirt just goes right in my mouth.
Oh.
Like at the buzzer, all net. Just like hits the back of my throat. I was like, you got to be kidding.
Oh.
It's freaking disgusting.
And now you got salmonella.
No, turkey doesn't. That's the thing about turkey, right? They don't bear any foodborne illness.
Oh, I don't know anything about turkey.
I think that's the conceit. That's the one good thing about
I
turkey.
agree with you. I mean, this is all going to be wrote by the time people listen to this, but it's like the turkey is it. I've never really had turkey where I'm like, I love turkey cold cuts. Let's be clear about that. But turkey, sliced turkey, where I'm like, this is fucking great. It's like, I don't know, man. Just cover this shit in other things so I can use it as a palate. It's like Michael Jackson says in, you want to be, what is it? You want to be starting something? You're a vegetable. They eat off you. You're a vegetable. That's what we want to consider with the turkey. You know, just put the mac and cheese on it or put the fucking stuffing on it. You know?
Yeah. You got to have the protein in there, but it's everything else that you're looking forward to. So
yeah, we'll see how it goes today. I'm interested to see what happens.
A lot. It's a lot of pressure for the turkey because and then not only cooking it to the right temperature, you don't want to overcook the turkey. There's the whole thing of that. There's a lot of pressure, but then it's carving.
Oh yeah, carving it. I don't even know where to begin.
I don't mind.
I don't really know where to begin.
I don't mind doing it. I like it's just a big chicken. If you make roast chickens all the time, it's just chicken on a larger scale. So I'm cool. I make roast chickens all the time. Just think about, you're just sizing up the roast chicken.
It's so funny, like the cutting of the turkey, the cutting of the chicken, like the father in a suit standing at the head of the table. Like we still kind of have this lineage, like where we're supposed to, like, oh, the head of the table, the head of the household cuts the turkey. It's like, dude, I don't want to fucking, what is this, 1850? I don't need to be cutting this turkey myself. You know, it's too much. The turkey's too much.
It's a lot.
Thanksgiving's kind of weird.
Last holdover, right? Like the woman doesn't carve. In my life, in my circles, the woman just doesn't carve the turkey, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. They cook it. They do all the hard work, and then the dad comes in and is like, "Hey, son," and
steal the glory.
Yeah,
brandish that knife.
Yeah, totally.
Oh my gosh! Well, what time are you going to mom's later?
We have to be there at 3, I think. So we'll probably leave at 2:30, so a few hours from now.
Okay, that's good.
There's good football games on today I'd like to watch too, but I don't know if I'll be able to catch them all. But yeah, like you said, we're recording here on Thanksgiving because we need to keep going. We need to put our shoulder into the wheel.
Got to do it.
As we get closer and closer to the end of the year, because we'll start stacking up, and then hopefully we'll be able to get away without any sort of interruption to publishing any of the shows, which is always our style here. I know we could go away. People are like, oh, just go away. And then we'll lose like a few hundred patrons if we did that or something like that, you know?
Is that right? Do you think that would really happen?
I don't know.
You know better than me.
I don't know. What I do know, though, is that from a marketing perspective, and this was not intentional, but it's our strongest thing, is we just don't miss episodes, and people know it. Like,
yeah.
I've said it. I know I've said it a million times, but I fucking think it's so hysterical on Twitter or something where it's like, oh, got home a little late. Can't stream tonight. It's like, well, you're going to lose. Loser. You know?
It's hard.
It's fucking Thanksgiving, and I'm here recording this show, so shut up.
Come on. I mean, come on. You got to tip your cap. You got to tip. Yeah, it shows appreciation for the people that take the time to listen. It's just, that's, I get it. I get it.
Dig, let's get into it. I had this idea for a show. We're going to do Final Fantasy IV next.
Yeah.
And I know people are looking forward to that, but I had this idea percolating that I don't think we've ever done. And again, we've done 273 episodes of the show now, which is pretty crazy. So, and I've already learned, as we've noted from Constellation, that we're already starting to people are coming in with topics we did fucking 2 weeks ago. So sometimes I'm like, damn, did we do something like this already? We might have done. Every once in a while we do a personal one, but I had this idea. What if we just asked each other 5? It doesn't have to be probing questions, but just generalized questions about youth, about things that you're curious about with the other person, remembrances, experiences, and so on. So I wrote 5 down, and I'll give you an example, and maybe we'll get through all of them and go back and forth. And so I'll begin so you have an idea of what I'm talking about.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
And so it has to be all revolved around our youth. So I guess this would be 70s for you, and then 80s and 90s for both of us, and maybe into the aughts in some sense for me.
That sounds good.
I wanted to ask you, do you remember a moment in your life, like in your childhood, of sports glory, like where you were a player? It could be skating, but I'd prefer for it to be something else, like baseball or football or something, like where you were like, you had a game, or you had a moment, or you were like the winner, or the champion, the guy that came in the clutch. Do you have any memory like that? Because I do have all the hockey I played in my life when I was a kid and in high school. I have certain memories of like, holy shit, that was an insane game that I just played. And I don't remember very much else, but I do remember these very specific games where like nothing could get by me. And for some reason I was just in it. And so I was wondering, do you recall anyone like that, whether you were in a little league or when you played football or anything like that, where you were the guy?
You know what? The very first thing that came to my mind, I know Mom will remember this because she still talks about it. I played Little League like a typical American kid starting in the late 70s, maybe 1980, so from T-ball on up. And I always enjoyed baseball. It's really the only team sport I ever really engaged in. And I got pretty good at baseball, like decent at baseball, maybe into junior high when I started to understand the game better. But when I was a kid, like T-ball and Little League era, I was a terrible baseball player. First of all, I had a terrible arm. And second of all, I was afraid of the ball. So standing in the batter's box against the pitcher was just, especially when you're a kid, there's a certain level of fear because kids are wild. They don't know how to throw straight yet. You're going to get hit. You're going to definitely get hit with a pitch, when you're 8 years old. It's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So
HPB?
I was a pretty lousy
HBP. Yeah. It's on your stats sheet.
I was really the prototypical kid out in left field, like picking dandelions. Like maybe even playing like deep left field. Like, the roster was too big. So there were 4 or 5 outfielders. I was the guy all the way in the back. Like no one was going to hit
4 or 5 outfielders. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was literally that kid, and probably I would argue even as a kid didn't enjoy it that much, knew I wasn't that great at it. And it was one of those things like a 70s or 80s parent, like our mom and dad just held our feet to the fire. Like, no, you're doing this type of thing. I would have rather been spending time with the kids, playing with the Star Wars figures or in the pool or watching cartoons. But that's what they had me doing. But I do remember this one moment of glory. Maybe once in a while I could draw a walk, and get on base. Very rarely made contact with the ball. But I had this one thing. I was probably 8 years old is my best recollection. I might have been younger than that. And I hit a triple. And I hit a little blooper, but it got through the infield. It got somewhere into the shallow outfield and I got around the bases. I guess I was pretty quick. That was my one attribute. Got to third base. I remember jumping up and down. I was so psyched. And what happened next, I'm not sure how many outs there were, but the next batter must have hit a little blooper up the third base line, but I just thought I would go home anyway. It's not like I really understood the game at that point. I wasn't looking at the coach. I wasn't even listening. I just got excited the ball was hit and I was going to score a run, right? So I go home. I remember the ball probably went like halfway between home plate and third base. The catcher ran in and scooped it up. That's how much of a blooper it was, and had the ball. Now I'm running towards the catcher who now has possession of the ball near home plate. Right. And I decide that I'm going to go back.
Oh, pickle.
I think he's got me, he's got his mitt outreached with the ball and he's going to tag me and he's running me back to third base. And I do remember this. Mom always talks about how hilarious it was. I'm running back to third base with my back arched and his glove is in that pocket of my back. Like if I didn't arch my back, he would have tagged me. And I got back to third base and ran around him and scored the run. And that was like my one moment, literally my one moment of Little League glory, where it was like I actually got a triple and then sort of sealed the deal by scoring a run. That was really the only thing I remember being positive until I had a coach probably when in my adolescence, like I was 11 or 12. And he took an interest in me and kind of moved me into the infield and put me at second base. And I started to understand the game better. He was a better instructor. And, I started to learn how to get little base hits and stuff like that. But before that, it was pretty dismal. But that was my one moment in the sun in Little League. I'll never forget it. Mom talks about it, but I do have very distinctive memories. I remember the fields where we played. It was probably like a collection of 8 or
was it
10
wait, that wasn't at Vern Critz or
no, this was Eagle Estates in Medford on Long Island. Like back in between Medford and Selden, like there was an old Cheap John's discount, liquidator store there. Like there was back.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly.
And it was the far field.
Yeah.
It was the far field all the way to the left. Like it was a hike to get back there. I remember exactly where it was. I remember it was dusk. Like I have so many memories of
Yeah,
that. But it was literally like the only positive thing that happened.
That's glorious. I mean, that's literally that's the definition of glory. I was gonna say you should have plowed over that catcher, man. He's in the baseline? Was he in the baseline?
Knock the ball loose.
Because if he was in the baseline, I would have made him fucking pay.
The catcher may have been my friend, Steve, who went on to be like the high school starting catcher. Like he was a really good baseball player, one of the better baseball players that I grew up with. It might have been him on the opposing team. I'm not sure. But you know what the other thing was? I don't remember a distinctive memory, another time where my teammates were cheering for me. You know, so it was like, wow, it was really like the dog got the patch of the sidewalk, you know, for a minute. It was literally the only sort of bright spot on a little league career that was pretty bad.
Yeah, cool, man. I thought you'd have an interesting answer to that, especially because you didn't play organized sports nearly as much as I did when I was a kid. So
no.
I was curious what your memories are of that. All right, cool. Good answer. All right, it's your turn.
All right. Now I have a bunch here and I wanted to see, okay, like I just thought like, let me write down a bunch of questions, a bunch of thoughts, and let me see the cadence of the conversation. But since we're starting at the beginning, I think this is a fair one for you, or this may be difficult to boil down to one, but I was wondering about this, Kyle. What was your favorite age, if you can remember, or your favorite grade school grade growing up? Like what was a specific age that for whatever reason you just have the most fond memories of?
Yeah, I think it's funny. Probably that kindergarten, first grade, maybe even the second grade era was pretty strong for me at Brookhaven Elementary School. It was Miss Leone and then Mrs. Rickenbacker twice, as I've talked about in the past. She was this kindly older Black woman who got married when I had her, and then she became Miss Edwards, which I thought, and I was like, that was like my first experience with that. Like, was like, whoa, okay, it's a different situation. Yeah, that's interesting. I think, you know, you and I think share this thought, and I assume a lot of people do, where I look at, especially being in this neighborhood, your neighborhood's probably a little bit older now. Like the kids are getting a little bit older. Maybe, I'm sure there's always young kids around, but in my neighborhood, there are just so many little kids here, from infant and toddler all the way to, there's really doesn't seem to be that many high schoolers because they're all that young, you know? And right. I'm sure there are, but they're like, you know, away doing whatever they do. They're not in the fucking street playing football. These kids are always out there. Dozens of them in this neighborhood. And I look at that and I'm like, those were the days, no matter where you are right now. Those were in maybe in high school. I would definitely look at high school as being like not my favorite years, just because those are the times when you have actual responsibility and there are stakes. They're not high stakes and the responsibility is not crazy, but it's when things start getting into gear, at least if you have a fucking brain in your head. So those years were a little bit different and more trying, and have fun and interesting memories from those years for different reasons. But when I look at the younger kids and I'm like, damn, dude, this is just like, the other day I was bringing the dogs around. I was with Micah, and there was this kid with like one of the fake cars that you drive, like the Power Wheels cars. Yeah. It was like a truck, and he was things. Like down a hill, and I'm like, do you need help? He was like trying to get up. He's like, do you need help getting out of there? And he's like, and I thought he was just being like kind of coy, because he's like, oh no, I don't need help. And he really did need help. But what he really wanted me to do is to take this huge log that he had like nearby and just move it for him, you know, like, because he was like making like a little hideout or something. And so I did that for him. So he was like, oh, and I was like, all right. And I like moved it for him and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's so funny. You guys have no idea what's going on. Like you have no fucking clue what's going on right now in any way. Like this is and I don't mean this to be even sardonic, like it's a pretty dark time in history right now, I think. And it's kind of glorious in some way. And I think that's the perfect words for, just like with sports stuff, where it's like these kids get to live a life where they don't have to worry about any of it. It's just, it's not real. So I think there's something about cognizance. Like I wouldn't go far back to being a toddler and in fucking nursery school and stuff. That was like, but there's something about first grade or second grade that's, you're starting to come into your own. You're starting to kind of develop a personality and wants. And I was not a bundle of energy, I wouldn't say, but I remember being so happy as a kid. Like being that young, where I'm like, this is good shit. I'm playing my GI Joes, TMNT's on. I'm going to school with my friends. My best friend lives down the street from me. We're basically detached at the hip. And I don't know. It's just that year. So yeah, that's kind of, I think that would be the way I would answer it. I think things got complicated for me after mom left, of course, too. And that affected the trajectory, but there's something very there's obviously something very innocent about those years, but there's just something about formative. Like you're going away for the full day. You're figuring out how to survive. And dude, I would love to go back and be a fly on the wall and like just watch me
Be the best.
You know, like what were you doing?
Yeah.
You
To
know,
really see what it looked like and what was going on, rather than just relying on these spotty memories. It is crazy though how much we do remember. Like you're talking about kindergarten, I'm talking about this little league memory from when I was 7 or 8. Like some of the things that we retain, it's so crazy. And why was that thing, obviously with the little league moment, that was meaningful. So that was going to kind of drill itself down into my unconscious or subconscious. But the other thing is it's just like that, the purity of being a kid, the lack of responsibility, and that, you know, the way we grew up, we were very fortunate. It could also be very dark for a kid if they have bad parents or parents that are addicts or single parent homes or low income. You know, they could also be horrible memories. We're very fortunate in that regard. But I do think of like if we were kids and we actually had some sort of cognizance of how good it was going to be right now, and that when you get older, you're going to have a job and you're going to have responsibilities and bills, and it's going to be good, but it's going to be different. I wonder if as kids we had an awareness of that, would we have enjoyed it even more? Because it's almost like rose tinted glasses in a way. Like we're looking back on how great it was, and it was great, but it's comparative to being an adult. So if we could be kids in the moment and be like, it's not always going to be like this, really like savor it, but you can't, and no kid can, because it's a maturity thing. You know, we're destined to be kids and then grow up and then look back fondly, I think. So it's, you know, it's interesting, man. It would be hard for me to pick even an era, because, you know, the childhood is just, it's special and it's fleeting. That's the thing. You can't have it forever. You know, so it already comes with this whole thing of it's short lived. You know what I mean? So it's a certain period of time. It's finite. So I think about it all the time. And because we're 10 or 11 years apart, I do often think about that. Like, I wonder what he remembers. I wonder the good times he remembers, or family events, or the things that you held on to, especially because in our family, we do have that dividing line of when our parents split, and how different things looked, especially being spread out geographically and not having mom and dad under the same roof and all that sort of thing. It changed, you know. So there's that one time when you were 6 or 7. I always forget this.
It was February 92, so I would have been 7, I think.
7, yeah.
5,
So
6.
that's really the moment where, you know, everything kind of took a 180. So I do think about that with you a lot, because I have memories of you, little 3-year-old Kyle, running around with Teddy Ruxpin and stuff like that. And I remember I just remember you being that age with your toys, and you were just a very happy, vibrant, you know, kid. So I always think of you like that. So I always think, what was he thinking when I was looking at you as a 14-year-old and you were 3, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's very interesting.
cool.
Yeah, because you're right. You remember those times more specifically, and I was there, but I have no comparative ability to remember those times, really.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And again, I have flashes of it. It's so funny because, like I said, I can walk through in my mind like every inch of our old house and every inch of the elementary school, and like it's so strange. But you're kind of, like you said, you're seeing assumptions of it, and like what you remember are these little flash frames of it, which is, it's kind of sad and it's interesting. You would understand there's only so much data, I guess, you can hold, but also like the ability of moving on. There must be an evolutionary reason. It's like, you got to let this stuff go. Like there are certain things that are going to be imprinted in you forever, and that's like your long-term memory, but you got to move on to the point where, I don't know that this is specifically true because I do remember moments from all these times, but it's like, tell me about being a 10th grader. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like in some sense, I remember the feeling, but I don't know that I even remember many moments of that. Per se, I remember where I'm supposed to be and where those people are, those places are, and who the people are, but the situations,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm kind of just half remembering. It's a little frustrating. Anyway, since you brought up mom and dad splitting, I did have a question for you. It's actually the question I used to pitch you this idea, which was
sure.
I was curious what you remember about when mom left, because I don't really remember this, like, which is crazy because I remember many things before it and many things after it, but I, for some reason, don't remember the specific moment or time or days, weeks, months leading after that. Like, the memory I have is being in, I guess that would have been second grade at the time, and like late that year, because it was like, the second half of my second grade year, and mom giving me this necklace with her, I guess it was her class ring or something around it. And that was like what I was supposed to wear to remember. And then I lost it.
Oh, wow.
Or whatever. And I had like this fucking crazy breakdown about it.
Yeah, dude.
And, so like, but I don't really remember the pound for pound, like what happened, because there's this, it's weird. I moved to New England to be with mom in August of 1993. So there's this year and a half or so that happened without her, where it was just us, like the kids and dad. And I don't really deeply remember this period at all. And it's interesting because I basically, like, I don't remember going into third grade and being like, oh, mom's gone. Like, I'm just doing this without mom now this whole year, basically. And that's so strange. I just don't remember what that felt like. I feel like I was in some sort of denial, or I was young, but not that young. And I remember little things like we had a nanny for a little while. I remember Mrs. Curry.
Yeah.
And you fucking hated her.
Dude.
She sucked. She did. She sucked.
Dad found her through the church.
Yeah.
I think.
Because we used to have
we
used to have the babysitter Nancy, who was really, really sweet.
Oh, she was awesome.
And she was like
and she dated back. Yeah.
Yeah. And she like kind of tapped out, I think, at some point. And then this full time, I remember this woman. What I specifically remember about her is that Eric Schumann, who was one of my best friends growing up, he and his mom just came over one day and they're like, oh, we're going to do this. Do you just want to come? Like kind of an impromptu thing. And I was like, because they just lived down the street, and I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. And then Mrs. Curry is like, you got to go to religion class. I'm like, you fucking bitch. I'm like, come on, man. My mom just left.
I remember her, dude, like it was yesterday. It's unbelievable. And I mean, shout out to Mrs. Curry. Anybody in that position would have had a bad look or would have gotten a hard time from us at that point, right? I mean, think about it. There was no winning at that point. We were kind of thrown into all kinds of disarray, and, we were kind of suffering this trauma. I mean, and it is, seriously, I'm not even being funny. Like, anybody thrust into that position, it was going to be merciless. And it's not like, we were giving her a hard time physically or doing this Home Alone thing or beating her with paint cans and shit. It was just that it was the attitude, I'm sure it was me and Dana, especially because you and Allie were pretty young. But I cut you off. I think you were saying something.
Oh, no, it's all good. I don't even remember. It wasn't important anyway. But yeah, so I want to throw that back to you and just see what you specifically remember about it, because this is kind of an unknown, and also we talk about it all the time, obviously, but it is also just extraneous. I never have really asked probing questions about it before, because I don't really know if I want to know, in some sense.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to be a part of something where you're so clearly, like, I must have not taken it very well. Like, there's no way that I would have taken that very well. I am clearly still a mama's boy in a major way, and I was when I was a kid. In a major way. Mom tells a story, and this is an early memory of, I went to nursery school for 2 years because I started early, and I graduated. I went to college when I was 17. I was just in this weird, it's not because I was smart or anything like that. I was just in this weird pocket of age, being born in October and the cutoff and all that. So I went to this Montessori school, which we might have all gone to, but actually you probably didn't, because we weren't in the area.
No, but I remember.
Me and Allie may have went there or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But I remember that when mom dropped me off the first day, like, I would not let go of her leg, and was crying and fucking hysterically crazy. And I actually do remember that, because I was being crazy. It's like, I cannot be away from my mom. That's insane.
Yeah,
that's insane. And so I wonder if that is kind of where the inoculation comes from, where it's like, you just don't remember this because it was bad. And I don't know if it was bad or not. It's strange to me that there's all of that time where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck. I don't remember any of this, So anyway, what do you remember about that time?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot because you posed this question to me, and I do think about it from time to time, but it's like a lot of what we're talking about today. It's memory and how unreliable it is. Mom and dad's breakup specifically, though, mom, or, AKA mom leaving in particular, is an interesting one for me because I almost feel like it has this aura of a movie that I saw a long time ago that I'm just remembering bits and pieces of. And it's this montage of seemingly disparate images, kind of frustrating, like MTV style cutting, like an art film. It's like I see the images, but I want it to make more sense. There's missing pieces. It's like missing frames of film almost. And I know that kind of refers to memory in general, but very much with mom's breakup and the culminating period thereafter. It feels like that to me. I don't remember a lot. And I think even as a kid, mom and dad split when I was 17. By the time I was 18 or 19, I started to realize something about myself, which I guess is common in a lot of people, but I'll speak for myself, is that I have a very selective memory. I think in a very self-preservational defensive way. Like it's my mind protecting me from trauma. And that I think for me, I'm always scared that the real memories are going to come back to me like an acid flashback and that it's going to hurt. Like, in other words, I get surprised that doesn't hurt more. But then I think it's you, Dagan, like it's your mind protecting you from something that was deeply traumatic. So even though I get frustrated that I don't remember more, I don't think it's possible for me to remember more. I just think that's the way my mind works. I remember realizing that in my late teens going into my early 20s, like this is just the way you function. This is the way you stay alive because it hurts so bad. That type of deal. When mom and dad left, I don't know if I ever told you about that. When mom left and mom and dad finally split, there was a build-up period that you wouldn't remember because you were too young. And I don't remember in detail, but I remember there being a time, like a shift in the atmosphere around the house that was different. Because when I was younger, and then mom and dad built their dream house and we moved from Medford to Brookhaven, and kind of life took a turn for the positive, and it seemed like mom and dad had more money and you were little, and there was just like a reset in the family in a good way, like a refreshing feel. Being the oldest, I really felt that. Like we had a baby, we had a new house. It was a huge house, a beautiful neighborhood. Dad got promoted. Now, also in this time, not too soon thereafter, mom started to go to school for American Sign Language. And then she kind of adopted a career because mom was always a stay-at-home mom. She became a flight attendant eventually. And the family took this different turn. It was busier. It was a different energy than growing up in Medford and the earlier days, but it was positive. You know what I mean? Like nice cars. Mom and dad had the vanity plates that said Firefly, referring to a firefighter and an airline stewardess. So it seemed like everything was going in a good direction, but I don't know how much, for instance, mom going to work for the first time had a negative impact on their relationship. They were also very young. Like I'll talk about this, not to spoil it, in the constellation topic tomorrow as a part of what I'm gonna say about things. But mom and dad had me when they were 22 years old. I mean, they were babies when they were parents. So by the time their oldest was a teen, or their two oldest were teenagers, they were still really young, when mom went to work. So I'm not sure what kind of differences were ushered in once mom took a job, but the energy in the house became different. And it went from remembering mom and dad laughing together all the time and being goofy and having this very Bert and Ernie dynamic where dad was kind of more serious and gruff and solemn and mom was goofy and always ribbing dad and teasing him. But I remember them presenting themselves literally as Bert and Ernie, right? Like they went as Bert and Ernie for Halloween and stuff like that. But there was this dynamic where they would laugh together and love each other and kind of celebrate their differences, and the fact that they had different personalities and stuff, and laughing at the dinner table every night to literally fighting every night. Like, I remember that happening slowly, where the atmosphere just shifted and became very negative. And I remember I must have been 15 in the new house, sitting up at the top of the stairs while they argued and worrying, like sitting on the top step and listening, eavesdropping as they argued. I'm not sure about what. And it got ugly and loud and somebody stormed out and stuff. And I remember for the first time as a 15-year-old worrying, like, oh shit, like your parents are going to get divorced. Now, this was 2 years prior to mom leaving. So it wasn't this overnight thing. It was a slow burn. There was a falling out, you know what I mean? And I remember sensing that even as a 15-year-old, there was something there to worry about now. I'm going to be like so-and-so in school whose parents are divorced, and thinking, you know, having that teen thing that a lot of kids go through when their parents get divorced, of thinking you're immune to it and you're not. You know, I remember that's when the worrying set in. So I remember that very specific instance of sitting at the top of the stairs worrying as they bickered and argued and shit like that. And it got ugly. And I don't remember mom and dad arguing before that. So I went 14 or 15 years. And if they argued, you know, maybe it was occasional, but I have no memory of them being like that, at least in front of us, you know, within earshot. So that was a decisively different look for, you know, and I guess I was a worrywart as a kid, so there might have been nothing there to worry about. It might have just been a routine fight, couples fight. But I do remember that being the kind of the flashpoint for something that was in the offing. And then I remember the day mom left. And again, you know, it's got this David Lynch art film type thing, black and white, grainy, frames are fading out. But I wish I remembered more decisively, because there had to be a decisive moment where even the, you know, things weren't looking good. They were arguing, maybe there were threats, there were possibilities laid out, but mom actually leaving had to be a decisive moment. And I don't remember it, but I remember the night it must have happened, because dad loaded us into the car and we drove up to Ragtime Pizza, which is our local pizzeria, our go-to pizzeria for dinner. And he ran in to get the pies or whatever and came back out, and not to, you know, throw dad under the bus, but he was crying. And it was the first time I remember dad crying. I was 17 years old. I never saw dad cry. Our dad was not the emotional type. He was not the heart on his sleeve type. He was not touchy-feely at all. Much different now than he was back then. This was a different man. Very solemn, a very prototypical, not even like Leave It to Beaver type, but a very emotionally sort of reserved father figure that I knew for the better part of 16 or 17 years, coming out to the car, like breaking down, like sat in the car, you know, maybe started it and sat in the spot and just broke down. And I remember being in the back of the seat, just having the sense of, you know, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like, this is bad. You know, like dad's crying. All right, this is something to worry about now. And I remember, I don't know if it was you or Allie at the time, but I have this really weird, particularly spotty memory of sitting in the back seat of the car, like the little dip between the driver's seat and the back seat near the hump, and facing backwards and grabbing your legs or Allie's legs and comforting you. I don't remember if it was you or Scoop. I don't remember which one. But that's the moment that I think it's kind of the last thing I remember. I remember Mrs. Curry. I remember Dana working all the time. I remember Dana taking a large part of the responsibility with watching you and spending time with you. But everything was, from that moment on, I think I went into protective mode. And I know I talked about this on the podcast before. I also made an act of running away from it by, you know, spending time at my best friend's house, at PJ's house, and really kind of trying to dodge and, you know, the pain, essentially. You know, I would be out skateboarding, I would be out with my friends. I would just try to be involved and active with my social life and with skateboarding and with whatever we were doing, in order to not be home and just sort of be surrounded by what was actually going on. And then it was also this kind of crazy period, Kyle, because mom left not too soon thereafter. She got in a really terrible motorcycle accident, and it could have been, it was bad. I fell and broke my arm really bad skateboarding. I was in the hospital for 5 days. So it was a very tumultuous, I guess that was 91, right?
92.
92. Was it 92 or 91?
No, I think it's February 92. I want to say it is.
92.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you must be right.
And I didn't really know that until Dad told me that, because Dad just spouted out the date one day. And I wish I remember the date, but just like, it was like February 24th, 1992.
Yeah, it had to be February for sure. Yeah. It was just it was the onset of what would be a very tumultuous year. And again, I think it's my mind just kind of forming that magical barrier. It's like, you're not supposed to remember this stuff. You're supposed to move on. We're going to protect you from these memories. And when I want to crack that eggshell and get in there, sometimes I realize, like you said earlier, like, do you really want to know? I mean, in the therapy capacity to go back and really deal with things, I think could be constructive or helpful in some way. But do you want to go through that journey of pain to get there?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I do.
You do?
Yeah, but not only with that, but just with everything. Like I want a psychotherapy, like split me open like an atom 3 times a week. I've said this before. Like one day I'm going to do that, where you pay a lot of money to a very high end professional who like just dissects you in sessions and probes and probes and probes and probes and like gets you going. And I think the reason I want to do that is because we talk about, sometimes it's not only like attaching to it, but reminding yourself that it happened, and that you and I talk about this all the time about oblivion, about there's a memory I hold, and I'm not saying it's any specific memory. We all have it. Like, just think there's a memory I hold where I'm the only person that knows that it even happened, or remembers, or cares that it happened. And once that's blinked out of existence, it's really blinked out of existence. And that's sad in its own way. But what's even more sad is not even tapping into the things that are in your mind, and then those also meaning oblivion. And I don't know that I'm comfortable with that. Like, listen, dude, there are periods of my life, and this is what's so annoying to me when people are like, oh, the privilege and all this, just because, and I'm not saying this happens often, but just because you're a white man, it's like you have privileged upbringing and all this kind of stuff. It's like, dude, I saw a man pull a gun on my mom. I heard my mom get the shit beat out of her. And I'm not talking about by my dad. I'm talking about the person she ended up with.
Right.
Yep. I saw like mass domestic violence as a kid. Like, you have no idea, the things that I witnessed, and that shit is haunting. That's the only stuff where I'm like, I wish that I didn't remember that stuff, and
that's hard,
but as opposed to kind of the more emotional younger years, where it's like, what happened, because like I remember going to Connecticut to visit mom, during this period with Allie, probably, or something like that, and all the rest. So it's like, you just, I understand like the mind and the mind's like, you don't want to remember, like you shouldn't remember sort of things. But I also like the idea that it's there if you're willing to find it, whether you need like drugs to find it, or and trip to find it, or you can just do it with therapy and the right professional asking the proper probing questions and all the rest. But I don't want to dodge that because of the philosophical nature of it being gone forever.
I mean, you're selling me on it. I mean, the goal of any kind of therapy, but let's say like a deep psychotherapy, I know the goal is to feel better and just healing. Because with me, even though I don't remember a lot, or I have this selective memory about everything, there was definitely fallout on all of us. And I could tell you what the fallout was, especially for each one of my siblings. But for me, it was a deeply codependent period with relationships that I had to get through. It's my OCD that I still deal with. There's a lot of things. So in a healing capacity, even to go through a painful sort of journey in order to get there, there is a willingness to do that so that I could not only be better for myself, but just be better for my family, right? The little things, my little picadillos, or things that drive the wife crazy, or, drive the kids up the wall, that type of thing. There is, that's the interesting thing, is that even though I feel like I don't remember a lot, and sometimes I want to grasp more of that film burn, it's like there was definitely, I definitely did suffer the effects, even though I don't remember a lot, which is interesting. It's like, what is this from? Oh yeah, it's from that. But what specifically? I don't know. You know what I mean? I was running, and also my mind was running away from it. And I think maybe it's something about a specific mind, just your own brain knowing that you can't handle it. So we're going to protect you. It's like it's like healing a bone, but it's something mental. It's something in your head. It's something that you can't articulate. But yeah, I deal with that all the time, man. Sometimes I do worry, like it's all going to come back to me and the load is going to drop and I'm not going to be ready for it. But very much like an acid flashback, which is the type of thing when you least expect it, all these memories that you feel like you never got a hold of are going to come rushing back. And who knows? There's no telling. Maybe that does happen. But yeah, man, it is interesting. It seems like hyperbole, and it's hard to explain even to the person who I'm closest with, in my wife, right? And Helene, because her parents are still together, that it seems like exaggeration, but you only know the effects of your parents getting divorced once it happens. It's my biggest fear, that I'm going to get divorced and kind of wreak that havoc on my kids. It's such a tragic thing because sometimes it can't be helped, So that's another thing, that the fear that left in me, and, sort of that constant being afraid of, like, oh my God, what if this happens to my kids? Like I'm almost like rooting my kids on, like, hurry up and grow up. This way, if it happens, you're out of the house. Like, right. It's almost like that. You know what I mean? It's like, be in your 20s already. So like, if me and mom split up, it won't, you'll have your childhood. Like, it's sad.
The Dagan Renaissance. All right. Yeah, that was my second question. I was going to bury that deeper into the show, but since it came up, I was like, I might as well just do this now. So that was my second question. It goes back to you now.
Yeah, man. So let me roll off this with you. I wonder if you remember, and you could take this in any direction you'd like, really. Do you remember what scared you as a kid? What really frightened you? I know we talk about the Tickly monster a lot sometimes, and that's been that's a legendary Colin story. So you could talk about that if you want. But what do you remember really scaring you about being a kid, or the future from that moment, or anything?
It's funny. I was just talking to Micah about this because she wasn't familiar with the show Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh,
and I'll answer it in this way, in a more funny way, I guess, in the sense that there were certain shows and TV programs and just vibes that you would get from movies and trailers. And I just remember being young, little kid, like really little kid, and everything kind of had a vibe, and a very forbidden vibe with many things. And things used to deeply frighten me. And one of those things was Unsolved Mysteries theme song. And I remember being upstairs in the Marie Courthouse or whatever, and being able to kind of hear it, from the living room or from the den, and just kind of being creeped out by it. And specifically, I have a memory of playing Mega Man 2 while mom was downstairs watching it or something like that. Because for people that don't know, Unsolved Mysteries theme song is so unnecessarily scary that do you know what I'm talking about with that song?
Of course.
Yeah, like it is. It's like, who wrote this fucking thing? This is like Lucifer himself wrote this song. It's crazy. It hits, and there's that crescendo moment at the end where like the keys are all just like these minor chords, and so I was like, oh my God, this is so fucking scary. And even as a kid, it was the same thing. But I always think about, and it's funny you bring this up, because I guess a funny answer would be, I just remember all the things that I was supposed to be scared of and not allowed to watch, and how I'd kind of be sent away for all that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff created this tension around all of those various events and whatever it was, like Dark Shadows and all that kind of shit that mom was watching, and like the revival of it. And I wasn't allowed to watch it for some reason. Or it was the same thing as I said about renting Nosferatu over and over again, but never watching it or rarely watching it because it was just so frightening just to have this relic of horror. It's kind of the funny thing is that you're so stupid as a kid, you can be dictated into almost anything. And everyone will set the cadence for you for all things. So, because it really is nurture. That's why I always say and it comes up a lot now. It's like being born in the culture is not really your fault ultimately as the individual. That's why you have to be treated as an individual because you're so stupid when you're a kid. We could go kidnap a Nigerian infant and bring him up here and it would be indistinguishable from, or he or she would be indistinguishable from our own children or whatever that we have around us.
Right. Of course. Right.
So yeah, that's kind of where my mind went with that question.
That's
which was
an interesting one.
Yeah. Because I'm sorry to say, I just wasn't really, I liked Castlevania and I liked Ninja Gaiden. That's a great example. Ninja Gaiden used to scare the shit out of me. That was a great example of another thing.
It's pretty scary.
Just the cut scenes and the vibe. The fighting that dude in the bar in the first stage always really, that's like a scary moment for me for some reason, especially because he beat the shit out of him so quickly and it goes into this really ahead of its time cut scene and the music kicks in and Jackio's face, I remember used to scare the fuck out of me. Where I would know when we would play it, like to not look at this time. Because you wouldn't skip cutscenes then, because you were really earning them, you know?
Yeah.
It would be weird to play Ninja Gaiden and not watch the cutscenes.
Oh, you have to, especially because of the music.
It's like Castlevania 3. When you turn Castlevania 3 on, you have to let the whole thing scroll.
Oh yeah,
and watch it and listen to it. You know,
that game is the best.
Oh my god,
the best. Yeah. It's the music and the rhythm and the way that Ninja Gaiden's a masterclass in just rhythm, like the way the cutscenes are integrated with the gameplay and just building a momentum. Like it's so good. But yeah, that speaks to me because when I was a kid, we talk about, our dad was a firefighter, so he would be away a lot, 2-3 day tours, plus he worked side jobs. So he was away sometimes 3-4 days at a time. We were at home, and maybe this was being the oldest, but we were home alone. This was before you were born, obviously, in 84. But I remember I decidedly did not want to watch anything that was going to make me worry about mom being home alone. You know what I mean? So I remember there was this made for TV, like late night movie. I must have saw it at Grandma and Grandpa's about this really creepy guy. I remember the actor specifically, his face, how scary he was. He was like a home invader or a thief or a stalker or something. And it was like this thing of like a single woman and how he was kind of stalking the single woman. And I remember like, that's exactly what I'm afraid of, and mom and dad do you remember mom and dad had this thing? We had a little laundry room in the old house, like a little mud room. And they had this thing fashioned out of wood, out of 2x4s that was made. So the back laundry room door that led to the patio locked, of course, but then they had this thing fashioned that they put on the wall to form a blockade between the door and the wall. So it was like this long 2x4 thing so that if you tried to push the door open, you couldn't. It was like a brace. So you couldn't push the door open. I just remember all those little details of like worrying about dad not being home. So I didn't want to watch anything realistic, scary about thieves or crime or murderers or, the Boston Strangler, like whatever. Like I would just worry about, oh my God, like my dad's not here. Like what are we going to do? Like type of thing if this guy comes for us. So that was always a big one. And then with media as a kid, did you ever see? There's something about this. There's a little documentary, a little low budget documentary about there's this rash of Gen Xers apparently who realized they were afraid of the Screen Gems logo at the end of movies and TV shows.
This sounds familiar. Yeah.
There's a whole thing there's something about the 70s and sort of like the film grain and the distorted analog audio playing into it, the way it just sounds creepy, and that culminating with like a very aggressive looking logo and maybe colors that come across sinister. But apparently like one person was like, the Scream Gems logo, like I would have to like hide. And then everybody's like, me too. And then until it got to this raised to this degree of sentiment that everybody was afraid of the fucking Screen Gems logo who's of a certain age.
I'm reading about some of the things.
Like I had to hide behind the couch whenever that came out.
This is like an ominous logo. It'd almost be funny to get a t-shirt made of this logo.
It looks evil.
Yeah, it does.
And you can't describe why.
It's a Sony company.
With the colors.
Screen
But
Gems is
there's
Sony
something
company.
about that as a kid. You just kind of link to something, either something just feeling off, or like you said, something that even adults are kind of setting this atmosphere of like, you're not ready for this. This is too scary for you. You're not, this isn't age appropriate for you. This is scary, or this is too sexy, or whatever, that type of thing. But yeah, man, that's the fun part about being a kid. Now that, that's lost with the internet. What the kids could just watch now on their own. That's the scary part about being a parent.
Yeah, there's like an 8-minute documentary here about it.
Yeah,
it's called The S from Hell, which is a great,
highly recommend.
Yeah, here I'm going to send you this.
It's amazing.
I'm going to send you this link just to like the way that this particular setting of the red on orange. I put the link in the chat here.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's something and it just looks aggressive. Like there's something about the logo itself. Yeah, it looks like an eye. It looks like something looking out at you.
It's really a great logo for like a villain or something, but
it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
I love that. Yeah, I love that people are just secretly scarred.
Like I would run out of the room.
By like the thousands and the hundreds of thousands.
One Gen Xer brought it up and everybody's like, holy shit, that was fucking
love it. That's the beauty of the internet.
So it seriously is. That's probably what happened, right? One person said it in the chat room.
Totally.
And everybody's like, me too.
Yeah, totally. Because you identify, I mean, that's what the internet was all about, especially early on, was like identifying someone that was like you, and so in any way, really.
Good point.
All right. My third inquiry for you is, tell me about, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past, like in a very specific way, but I think it would be fun to visit if anything specifically comes to mind. Do you remember the voyage, like stem to stern, of going and buying a specific action figure, like whatever it is, a Star Wars figure, GI Joe, Transformers, Mask, any other things you were into? Do you remember like the voyage of getting like the whole thing, going into the store, going through all the figures, carding through them, as we would say, and getting out of the car and opening it and making the decision, or does any specific toy stand out to you like that?
Yeah, that's a great one, man. This is the type of question that it's going to, like, 3 or 4 really great answers are going to occur to me as soon as we stop filming this. But you know what? The first thing I thought about was the first action figure that I remember being really difficult to get. And I must have been slightly older by this point. I had to be at least 9. Was Storm Shadow, the first Storm Shadow for GI Joe. I remember going to the toy store. Now you have to remember, I know I say this a lot, but I grew up getting toys for certain occasions. Like if I got a good report card, mom and dad were very good about 4 times a year. You get good grades, we're going to get a toy from the toy store. You could spend $10, $20, whatever it was. Christmas and birthdays, of course. And then I had our grandma and grandpa, our maternal grandparents, were very good to me and just bought me whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, but they weren't with me all the time. So I did have my grandma and grandpa as a caveat, but getting toys was a treat, like that was a thing. But I remember getting a little bit of an allowance money, or the $5 or $10 folded into my birthday card, and going to Toys R Us or going to Child World or Play World and decidedly looking through the pegs for Storm Shadow. And there wasn't, like 4, 5, 6 visits. Storm Shadow was not an option. I remember really chasing that figure and it getting frustrating for whatever reason. And I never owned him. You got me a Storm Shadow, I think. Did you get me Storm Shadow or Snake Eyes?
I can get you a complete Storm Shadow if you want. I gave you a complete 85 Snake Eyes because that was the one you didn't have, the one with Timber.
Yeah.
I thought that would be
That's
cool,
right. I never owned it. Yeah. That was a chase.
Do you have him set up anywhere, or is he put away? I gave him in a little coffin.
No, he's right here.
Oh.
He's on the shelf.
Sick.
Yeah, he's out of reach, but he's on the shelf.
That's an awesome one with just those gray tones like on the belt and stuff. Yeah,
absolutely classic. Storm Shadow was the first figure that I never got because of that. And the other thing I thought of when you asked this, Kyle, was we had you're too young to remember because it closed down when you were a baby. I think we had an independent sort of mom and pop toy store in Nassau County on Long Island. I guess that would be considered Williston Park. And it was called Big D. And it was a one-off. I don't think there were even 2 locations. It was a one-off toy store. It was really a discount store / I guess kind of a drugstore in some way. Like it was a market, but they had half the store. So like you could get spinner racks with paperbacks and home goods and health and beauty products, but the entire back of the store was a toy store, and it was a proper toy store. Like they had all the down hot shit when it was out for boys and girls. Star Wars, GI Joe, Transformers. It was almost overwhelming because at any given time, if you were looking for something, they would have it. But then as a kid, and again, this is pre-internet, as a kid walking in there, there'd be 20 other options you never even knew existed.
Right.
Like it was like that. And it was always like 30 deep on the pegs. Like it was stocked and always had the hottest shit. I'm not even sure how. Like better than any Toys R Us I've ever seen. Like the Big D was just the shit. And I think there was another store that my best friend went to that I wasn't really familiar with, not far from there in Hicksville, called Coronet, which was the same thing, an indie place, but always hot. Like always had the hottest shit, whether it was Cabbage Patch or Barbie or Star Wars or Transformers or whatever. I don't know why I didn't just get Storm Shadow from Big D, because Big D definitely had it. They had literally everything at any given time. But for some reason, that one just fell through the cracks. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Big D because that place was a kid's dream come true growing up. Like if you wanted, like I was looking for, I remember the die-cast Matchbox Voltron lions being a hot thing. And it was like, it had this Cabbage Patch resonance where it was like, you just can't find them. You know, they're too hot. They're flying off the shelf. Going in there, and again, like there was just a Voltron section 30 deep. You want Red Lion? There's 50 of them. You know, that type of thing. Where it had to be, they had to make such enormous profits just in order to keep that place stocked like they did. It was pretty unbelievable. Like, you'd never seen anything like it. So that was the type of thing where I just remember Big D. It was never a chase. It was always the problem going in there was you were going after one thing, but then you ended up with so much more to choose from than you could possibly have imagined. So it was hard to just pick one Transformer or one play set, whatever it was, type of thing. But yeah, Storm Shadow was the one, man. That was the figure that I just could not get a hold of. The only other thing I can compare to that is Star Wars late, I guess in 82, 83, with the final 17 Kenner Star Wars action figures, mostly Return of the Jedi, but there was a variety.
Yeah, it was Power of the Force, right? Or whatever. That was like the original Power of the Force.
No, was it pre-Power of the Force, or was it actually Power of the Force proper? I'm not sure.
Like I thought that was like didn't they have like because there was like the New Hope stuff, then the Empire stuff, then the Jedi stuff, and then I think then there was like an 85, right? That was like the original.
Oh, you know what? It might be. It might be, or that might have been released Return of the Jedi and Power of the Force card later.
Because that's like where the coins came from and all that shit.
Yeah. They were hard to get a hold of. I remember the first two films, or whenever I started collecting, which was a little late because I was pretty young when Star Wars came out. Star Wars Empire was probably the heart of it, where it was like it wasn't hard to get anything. It was so hot. Everybody had it, even kids that weren't into Star Wars. By the time Return of the Jedi came and went, and I guess we didn't realize it, but Star Wars was waning in general, those final 17 figures were hard to get, like Lightsaber R2 and Stormtrooper Luke and all those kind of, like, it was like impossible. Like you just didn't see them. It was only like the peg warmers, whatever they were for that collection, that were around, and you just never saw them. So distribution must have really dropped off at that point. And I was also getting older. I think I was also feeling the pressure at that point. Right. Like toys are gonna, for Gen Xers, a lot of you guys who remember this, like there was a significant, we were on the clock. It was like I can only collect toys for another couple of years. Like it was pressing. Like I needed to get these things, and some of them I just never got. Some of the last Ewoks, they were really hard.
Right. Those were that was in that line. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and I think like Wee Quay, that soldier, that weird Jabba the Hutt.
Oh,
character is in there, and others. Yeah, that's good shit. Yeah, I love that. It's funny, man, because I remember that store, Child World, I guess it was called, and it was on Sunrise, and it went away at some point, Sunrise Highway on Long Island, and I remember feeling in there being. It's probably one of those childhood things. There are those famous images of that kind of chubby kid in the 80s. They're like they're Getty pictures that go around every once in a while. The kid in the GI Joe aisle. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're like famous pictures.
Oh yeah, dude.
Because like they just get circulated constantly because it's like the only shit we have that like shows that stuff. And I remember it being like that, where it's like there was a just GI Joe, an entire aisle of it, and the carded figures being like this huge wall in front of you, and be like, oh my god, this is incredible. And I remember just that feeling of carding through, like you just even know how to do it, and maybe it makes you good with your fingers when you get older. Yeah. But it's so funny because I have memories of buying all sorts of different GI Joes and getting them, and including I remember you giving me Lamprey. But like it was the second edition of Lamprey, and it was orange and blue, like a neon orange and blue, and I actually love it. And it came with a backpack, like a voiced backpack, where you put the 4 different buttons on it.
That's right.
And that was one of my first GI Joes because that was maybe the first GI Joe that was mine. Like you actually, because you introduced me to it, gave me them because I think I discovered the cartoon, and then you gave me your toys and kind of handed those over to me. And what I remember actually about you, and I don't know if you remember this, is that you were much more, you didn't seem to give a shit really about your GI Joes. You were much more like, I wasn't allowed to fuck with your Star Wars toys. That I remember. That was like off limits. Like you were not allowed.
Yeah, really?
And your Transformers. Like those, I wasn't allowed to like mess with those at all. But the GI Joes, you're like, you didn't really care about those as much. And so I remember you giving me that Lamprey at the kitchen table in Marie Court for whatever, I don't know what it was for. You should just buy me things. I mean, Dagan was considering the age difference and like Dagan's, lack of money in that time, he was very generous. He bought me a lot of things. Remember you bought me that huge, I still have it. It's in the attic, the huge life-size Leonardo.
Yes.
Dagan bought me like this huge Leonardo stuffed animal. It must have been a fortune.
I remember buying that.
And because we both loved Leo. And so it's funny to think about that. But what I remember even more is in New Hampshire when I lived there and in Maine. So it was, we were shopping in the same place for 5 years. There was Fox Run Mall. I don't know if that exists anymore. In there was a KB Toys, and then there was a Bradley's, and then next to it. And then there was a Montgomery Ward next to that.
Oh my
And then
God.
there was a Toys R Us at the end of this like huge chain of different stores. And I would go make that loop on a constant basis, like forever make that loop and buy Star Wars toys and have like a very order of operations. The toys were cheapest at Toys R Us, so you would start there. And then you kind of work your way towards Montgomery Ward. Only very rarely, like service merchandise was the same thing where like once in a while they had really good shit, but you had to really hit it right. Bradley's had a lot of good GI Joe stuff, less for Star Wars. And then going to KB was a last resort because it was the most expensive there, but you would often be able to find things like in the early Power of the Force 2 run, it was like Leia was impossible to find, like, ape face Leia. If everyone knows that horrible figures, they were horrendous. Lando and Obi-Wan and the Stormtrooper, those were the rare ones. And I remember just going and trying to hunt those and slowly getting them, and I remember getting Leia at KB and it was, $7.99 or whatever, when it would have been $4.99 at Toys R Us or $3.99 at Walmart. But I'm like, fuck it, I don't care.
That's right.
Because I have ape face Leia now and I don't have to worry about it again.
KB did have those inflated prices.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So you had to just, dude, I've said this before. I remember there being a pyramid of Atari Jaguars in that KB toy store, like in the middle of the store for like $20, like literally nothing. It's hysterical thinking about that stuff. I was just showing Mike a circular, like it was like a Nobody Beats the Wiz circular or something from 94. And they were just giving NES games away. Basically. It was like, there was a list of them. I'm like, dude, what the fuck? No one knew.
Dude, it's so sad. I remember KB specifically because they kept their NES displayed behind the register, so they had all the boxes up there.
That's
so
what you saw when you went up to the register was the games, the video games.
You had to see them. That was it. You couldn't get by. Couldn't go through a KB joint without seeing that. But I remember like the Peg Warmer NES, the now rare ones like Panic Restaurant, Dinosaur Peak, Wacky Races, like the ones that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars now, just warming pegs. Like they eventually, same thing with Funko, like they would just be giving these things away. It's like you just want to go back in time just to just to kind of cash in, but also just to kind of shake people. Like, do you know how much is this going to be worth?
Yeah, it's like it's insane, and now everyone's chasing that, but because of overproduction and over analysis and our own awareness, it's cut down on the value of a lot of different things. There's always going to be intrinsic value in certain things, but it is true. It's funny. You know what I always remember about KB Toys? Always my eye always being drawn by that fucking yellow Metroid box when they re-released Metroid.
Oh my God, I remember that so well. Yeah, dude. Yeah, because that might even did they reissue those when the Super Nintendo was already
Yeah,
out?
they did, because I think that was during the red, like that red top era where those late, like Mega Man 6, and I think it's not Dr. Mario. Yoshi's Cookie and stuff like that. Like those.
Sure,
those,
that was a late
yeah.
one. Yeah. Dude, it was, and also just the way you mentioned that gamut in the mall, that era. It's like R.I.P. 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 Montgomery Ward, dude. Do you remember? Now this is for all you younger cats out there. Talk about the analog days. Montgomery Ward was a department store, but unlike Sears, they heavily, as far as I know, at least in New York, they heavily relied on their brochure, their mail order. So it was catalog based. Montgomery Ward, I don't remember the stores being as big of a thing, but they had a location in a town next to us in Patchogue that was an office, essentially. It was no bigger than a bank. It was just on Main Street. And the whole intention was to go in with the catalog and order from the person behind the counter. There was no stuff. There was no merchandise. It was just catalog based. You went in, you said, I want this. They took your order, and then they shipped it off to you from whatever warehouses they had throughout the country. That was the real analog days where you went in, mom and dad took the catalog home, you did the thing, they went in and bought it, sight unseen. Again, no product, but they had to go to the actual location. So it really was akin to like going to a bank. You just walk in, there's a counter there, nothing else. And
good stuff.
I just remember that being Montgomery Ward was how I got everything for Christmas, probably my entire childhood, and now it's like, who knows what these businesses were relegated to now.
It's the distant memory. It is. I watch a lot of the dead mall videos on YouTube. I really like that genre. It's very depressing. I don't know if you're into those too. And
so good.
And there's a lot of guys that do it that are pretty small. Like I watched this one guy that doesn't have, he gets a few thousand views basically, and he's awesome at it. And he just goes to these malls and he figures out if it's a dead, dying, or vibrant mall. And I've watched so many of these videos now that it's surprising for me to see. It surprised me I say this to Micah, because our local mall is like totally vibrant. And it's like impossible for me to believe that because it's so bleak in these videos. It's crazy. It is. The era of the ubiquitous mall. Like, I do wonder, our hometown mall in Long Island was like real mall was Smith Haven Mall, because we had Sunrise Mall or Sunvet Mall, which was, and that was kind of always a dead mall for me. It was one of those malls where it had like an inside concourse on both sides, but it also had like half the stores were also on the outside. And you could walk through the stores inside and then go through and all of that. But it never seemed to catch on. Like one of its anchors is Pathmark, which is a supermarket. And so we had like some shitty malls always, but Smith Haven was the mall for us. And then on Long Island, the really nice mall everyone goes to is Roosevelt Field. And I'm sure that's fine. But I don't know what the status of Smith Haven would be today, because there was no empty storefronts in there when I used to be a kid.
No, that's a great point. That mall, I'm not sure. Roosevelt Field is still top 20 in the country.
Yeah, I'm sure Roosevelt Field's a scene, dude. I'm sure that's never going to change.
I mean, that's a hub. Mm-hmm. So is Smith Haven Mall, though. You can't just have Roosevelt Field. Long Island's way too big. Like, you need one in the middle of the island where Smithtown is essentially. But that is a good question. I wonder what Smith Haven Mall is doing now, because
I'm on the website.
That was major.
Stores. Oh, they seem to be healthy. It's the stores. It's like Aerie, Aeropostale, Aldo, American Eagle, Apple, Arden.
Oh, so it has all the stuff.
Auntie Anne's.
All the essentials.
Barnes and Noble, Bath and Body Works. Yeah, they seem to be.
Barnes and Noble, dude.
They seem to be totally fine. So yeah, that's good to know, because this was our mall. Yeah, Dollar and Things closed.
Uh-oh.
Those are the stores that's what they always say in the videos. Like, when those kinds of stores start getting into the mall's dead.
That's the death knell, dude. That's the beginning of the end.
There's two game stores, a GameStop and then a Game On. And yeah, what is Game On?
There was Smith Haven Mall, you talk about it a lot, had a Babbage's, right? Which was a big video game hub
Hmm.
when we were growing up. But there was another video game store in that mall. Babbage's was near the food court. I remember that. But deeper into the mall, sort of in the heart of that mall, there was a video game store that I didn't even appreciate how good it was until I thought about it in retrospect when I got much older. Like I remember going in there, they had all the Turbo graphics, all the Turbo Duo CD stuff. And you know what it was? That was the first stuff that really represented an anime like from Japan image for the North American audience. So I always remember being really drawn to it. Like, what the hell is that Turbo Duo thing? Like that looks like proper anime, that type of thing. But they had all the hot shit. They had Neo Geo and all that kind of thing. I don't remember what the name of the store though was. I do remember it was near Sam Goody, but I don't remember what the name of the store
was. It like because I remember in Smith Haven, this was more. There was a Funko at some point that turned into a GameStop, I guess, and then there was
Probably.
an EB near the food court, and then there was a third store.
Maybe
named Planet Comics that was like a fusion store where you can buy I used to buy Dreamcast games there.
And, maybe it was that.
But I don't know if it
might have been that.
Because I remember in New Hampshire, which you wouldn't know this mall, but there was a Software Etc., which was the only one I like, and an EB.
That might have been it. That might have been it. Software Etc.
And then And then this is funny. I'm sure this is not the case anymore, but this is dead up real. Guys can go look this up. There was a mall in California, Serramonte Mall, in just south of San Francisco, a very famous, popular mall where there were 2 GameStops
in the mall.
Yeah, because one of them was an EB and one of them was a GameStop. And then when the takeover or the merger or whatever happened at that time, they just kept them both open. And one was on one side of the mall and the other was on the other side of the mall, but they were dead up in the same mall. It was very weird. And I don't know if people out there, you guys can write in the comments or whatever, if you're from that, the Bay Area and you remember that there were literally 2 GameStops, functioning GameStops in the mall at one time for years.
Dude, did I ever tell you this? Until like a year ago in the suburbs here. So 2 strip malls across a major road from each other. There were 2 GameStops and you could walk from one GameStop to the other in 2 minutes.
It's so weird.
You could drive there in about 20 seconds from one to the, and they both stayed open, even through all the tumultuous shit going on that we were reading about in the news forever. Both locations. I mean, they were as close to being next to each other. There was a Kohl's in between. Like that's how close they were.
So unusual.
It was like ridiculous. It's like, why are these both here? There must have been, I don't remember. Maybe I was out of sync with gaming in general, but there must have been a time that GameStop was really raking it in order for them to be. It was like worse than any 2 Starbucks you've ever seen. It's like, do we really need both?
No, I really do think that it's the same thing with the one in the mall. What probably ended up happening was that one of them was an EB, and then they just didn't shut them down.
That's interesting
because that is what happened in Sierra Monte. But it is weird. It's like, okay, so you're the same company. You would think that this would be an obvious redundancy, like obvious.
Right.
But this is the kind of company you're dealing with. It's no wonder they fucking are, next to dead now.
It's hilarious.
It's so weird. I haven't stepped foot in a GameStop in many years.
It's been a while. I always think about, I know I've said this to you before, but I just think it would be fun for you to go into a GameStop. You or Chris, I guess Dustin's getting to that point too, where
I don't know that I would be recognized by almost anyone. I try.
Do you think so?
I don't know. It would all depend on maybe I'm sure there are many people that work at GameStop that listen to us, but that's a numeric thing. It's like you would have to just hit the right GameStop at the right time, probably.
Yeah.
I always think about that too. Like there are famous. It happens constantly where there's like, for instance, with the Game Award nominees, I don't know who the fuck any of those people are, and I'm not saying that as like, I'm a dickhead and I'm bigger than you. They're all mega big. They're way bigger than I've ever been. I have no clue who they are.
Isn't that funny?
So it's
gaming is so big.
Yeah. There's just a place for everyone. So you have to find the right GameStop. And we haven't really been nice to GameStop, so I'm sure that's probably driven people away. All right, Dig, I think it's on you now.
All right, it's my turn. I have a couple here for you that I was really interested specifically about little kid things. But let me ask you this. If you could remember. Do you have any regrets in your memory for being a kid. Now, this could be something as much as, I remember this one time, this one kid was getting bullied. I didn't stand up for them, or I grew apart from this friend, or I didn't play team basketball in 7th grade because I think I really could have been good at that. Just anything from growing up. It could be a small regret, a larger regret, something serious, something funny, but whatever. Do you remember having anything? Do you look back and say, oh, I regretted that when I was a kid?
Yeah, everything you kind of said touched on something for me. I've said before, I guess an interesting thing that it's not really a regret because I just don't know that it would be possible because of my love of hockey during the time and like the demands of that on my life, which were heavy, like all weekends, many weeknights.
Yeah, man.
It was very intense actually for a young kid. I think back on that and I'm like, that was interesting. I was playing hockey like 5 times a week for years, basically. And it was fun. But the one thing I realized as I got older, and I love hockey, it's my favorite sport, is that I really also love football. And I didn't discover that until as I described to people, it was too late. And I don't think I would have been a very good football player. I'm not built like a football player. Maybe I would have been built differently, but I'm only 6 feet tall. So you're only going to go so far at that height at most positions. And I always like to say that I would have really loved to play cornerback. I love that position. I love defense in football. I think it's fascinating. I love the fact, like, I love that the one side never has the initiative and always has to react. And the defenses that are good defense is so difficult to play because think about it, you don't know anything. You don't know the first fucking thing that is really going to happen when the ball is snapped. You have to study and try to figure out these patterns and read into it. And defenses that do that really well it's much more impressive to me than a good offense, just because you have the initiative. And so you determine what's going to happen. And so corner was always a position that was really, really attractive to me when I came to discover that I love football. That just, I love the, obviously passes, defense and all of that, but just and any defensive player can intercept and does intercept the ball, but most interceptions come from the secondary. And I love those game changing plays where you watch it. Well, first of all, you think about classic Madden, right? And you throw the interception and the screen turns, right? That classic. It's classic. And so you're on the offense, you're kind of on the offensive side of the ball. But I also love the feeling. It's a very specific thing when a camera is tracking a pass and then the ball is intercepted. Because like it interrupts the flow of the kinetic kind of the pass is being thrown to this guy and he's going to run forward and everything's going in reverse now. And I always loved that. And so I just regret that I didn't know that I loved the game more, to have explored potential opportunities. Not that I would have ever done anything at any high level, but just to fuck around with it. I just didn't know. No one in my life other than Uncle Mike cared about football. And it wasn't until I got to high school, and I say before, the 1998 Jets team was really the team that was a big deal when I was in 9th grade, and that was kind of the team, Vinny Testaverde and going to the AFC Championship and all of that, where I became kind of aware of football in some meaningful way. And by that point, and also our high school team was excellent, and I was friends with a lot of those guys, and we used to go to their games, and so by that point, I realized I loved the game, but it was just too late to do anything about it because you don't just start playing football when you're older. It's just a strange thing to do. And I wouldn't have had any time or opening to do so anyway. So that kind of is a regret because I think it's an awesome sport. And in some way it's a sport that's, I don't want to say most related to video games, but it's a turn-based game. It's a game that I'm surprised that people in gaming don't appreciate more. There are big overlaps between the two spaces, of course, but as I've said many times, the whole sports ball mentality and all of that, it's like, I don't understand what you don't understand about this. This is basically Final Fantasy Tactics in some sense. Think about it. It's like classes of characters with different jobs and rule sets around them and turns, literal turn down, turn it over. Now the initiative goes to the other side and all the rest. I love breaking it down like that. Baseball is actually very similar in some sense. And where it's turn-based and it builds and it culminates. And so football to me is, that might be a big regret it's not, maybe it is a big regret, just that I didn't know earlier, even because I don't think I would have played and I don't think I would have done anything with it. But I even love the whole other side of football, the play calling and the study and the preparation. Football is I think people don't understand. I think people that don't understand football don't understand how difficult it is. And how much 90% of it's in the classroom. I don't think anyone really knows that doesn't pay attention to football knows or understands that component of it. That it's the people that literally know the most that win. They can execute, of course, but it's those that have the playbook studied that found the chink in your armor in the film that they studied of you and all the rest. I think it's awesome. So yeah, that's kind of where my mind went with that.
Football. Yeah. What would have been, see, I'm going through this with Graydon because he's 13 and I understand it a lot from his perspective too. Like he thinks about soccer now, right? And he played like a lot of kids. He started when he was 6, but he probably dropped off with soccer by the time he was like 8. Like he lasted like 2 years and just lost interest. And I think he looks back at soccer now and he says, I'm getting tall, like I'm fast, I have long legs, like I'm sort of agile, like I think, and plus I think it looks fun, but he's sort of feeling like, well, my friends that all started soccer at 6 and stuck with it the entire time, and now they're on travel teams. Like it would be, he's intimidated by that. He feels like it would be a big deficiency for him to get started now, which I understand when he looks at his friend Cole, who's been playing the entire time. And now like he's in Maryland playing on the weekends and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's going to take a while to catch up with Cole, for instance. But at the same time, I started doing my thing when I was 13. So I was his exact age. So I'm trying to instill that in him. Like, look, I started skateboarding when I was 13. By the time I was 16, 17, I was pretty good at skateboarding, So there's that. You'll have to work a little harder. Skateboarding was a little different because it wasn't like, oh, little Johnny's been skating since he was 6. I have a lot to catch up with. So it is different. We were all kind of, the Gen Xers were all kind of starting basically, at least on the East Coast at the same time-ish, a lot of us. But so he's up against that. But I feel like I don't want him to be intimidated by that. If he really wants it, he could go get it. But what I want to flip that back to you is saying, what age do you feel like would have been too late? Because when you're 13, you feel like it's over. But when you're 50, you want to tell that 13-year-old dude, it's not too late.
Yeah.
Like that type of thing.
Yeah, I think I just don't know based on my honest reflection on me as a physical specimen at that time. And what I knew and understood about the game then as opposed to what I know about it now. Like it's hysterical. Like the more you watch football, I watch football obsessively, where you just start seeing it differently and you start seeing penalties before they're called. And then you just go through all these different things where you note, oh, that guy clearly held, or that's a clearly false start. And then you see the flag go in the air a millisecond later or whatever. And I love that aspect of it. So I think I had the mental acuity to do it, but I was like a tall glass, not even tall. I was just a glass of water in some sense when I was a young kid and a young goalie, and that was great for hockey. I wanted to be young. I wasn't going to always be young. I wanted to be small and agile because I thought that was pretty important, and it was pretty important to that style of goaltending at the time. But that wouldn't have translated well physically, I don't think. But it would have been interesting to just have gotten involved. Like Bellport has a prolific football program. And that's the other thing too, is that there was just no way I was going to make that team. Maybe like the JV team or something, which would have been fine. But there were other ways to get involved too, especially because those guys were cool. Like I liked the football team. They were nice. They were actually nice to me anyway. I don't know if they were nice to other people, but I was friendly with them, and they won the Long Island Championship twice when I was there. And it would have been cool to be part of that, not part of the I'm part of the team, but just equipment manager or do something like to just hang out and be there. But I used to go to the games and it was fun. I think I should have probably been more open-minded to those possibilities of being a student assistant of some sort, like some people are or whatever. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting to have that wherewithal now looking back. Kyle, you may be surprised to hear this, but when you asked earlier about, favorite sports moments growing up, I did have an appreciation for football as a kid. It was probably the thing I liked to play most, from a certain age bracket. And, whether it was playing tackle football in the backyard or playing touch football on the street, there was always something that I really appreciated about football and how different it was compared to something that I knew a little better, like baseball. And that it's kind of similar. I hear what you're saying, but there's something so much more orchestrated about baseball, where it feels like football starts orchestrated and a stop and start and it has that similar thing, but there's so much more wild card energy that could happen. Like I remember being as a kid, it was those little exciting moments that you can't possibly artificially set up, like an interception or playing tackle football in Tommy's backyard and we're on the same team and Tommy goes to catch a pass and it gets tipped off his fingers and it's flying up now and I snatch it and run into the end zone. Like the little moments, action moments that happen that you can't create artificially, that just have to occur. I always love that. It's like those moments, it was like those glory moments that just felt so good. And I think that I always liked football from afar. I never really got into it as an adult, but the strategic aspect of it, not just for coaching, but something about the quarterback that really attracts me about that position and being the leader of the team on field and everything. But there was always something, this deep-rooted appreciation I had for football playing as a kid, even though I wasn't big, I didn't have a good arm, but there was something fun about it in that it felt like anything could happen. And it was those moments that were fun because you couldn't possibly predict it. It's just that you had to, it was very, very in the moment. And that was, for me, that was much more fun than playing like Little League or playing T-ball on a team. You know, those were the moments I think that, you know, when it's weird because you get kind of put off by, all right, you get to a certain age where you realize your athleticism doesn't necessarily match, you know, the jockier kids or the kids that are really interested in school sports and everything. But we all start out, I think, with that same appreciation before we're kind of put off and intimidated by the fact of skill. You know, so I remember being that raw enthusiasm for football as a little kid in the 70s and 80s and having the NFL lunchbox and being a fan of the Cowboys and just feeling like this is for me too. And then you get old enough to realize it's kind of sad in a way, right? Because it's like, I'm not that great at it, so why waste my time?
Yeah.
But there's that age where it's just like you're all just enjoying it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the X's and the O's, the Jimmies and the Joes. That's what there's an argument in NFL or in just football generally is like, is it X's and O's or Jimmies and Joes or whatever? Which is like, is it the players or is it the strategy? Yeah. Like I fucking hate that saying. I hate it. Stop saying it.
I never heard that. Thank you for that.
So, Dag, let's actually leave it there. I have more to say, but we've got an hour and a half.
I like it.
I think that's long enough for now. And yeah, I thought that was fun.
I had a good time. That was really fun. Yeah, I like these kind of episodes. I hope people appreciate them.
I think people do. I mean, it's hard to say. People like the ones where we obviously get into the things they love too, but there's something about the storytelling that's, you know, our audience loves too, because Knockback's a niche product, but like there's always an outpouring of, when I talk about canceling shows and moving schedules around or whatever, there's always an outpouring of like, oh, please don't, you know, I hope that they see that we really love Knockback. And what I see about Knockback is that it does really well on Patreon, especially. So,
oh, that's nice.
And so I think I
guess
what I'm saying is that I think people, they do appreciate it. And so we keep going.
I mean, I love hearing that. And I know you and I still enjoy doing it. I mean, let me ask you this now that we're wrapping up the year and we're kind of in this post-mortem Knockback year of going only twice a month for the first time, right? How do you think that cadence is going? Do you like this new rhythm? What do you think about it compared to, you know, the way it started? All of that.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think I like the new cadence. I think the shows are better because we're able to prepare for them better. It's not like we're not constantly on the clock for the next show, which is good. I need to continue to pare down my own appearances on shows, which I will be doing in 2024, not to the detriment of anything we do now, but just generally speaking, being much more careful with that. Cause I do feel a little bit overextended. My one problem is, I don't want to feel like a media zombie. And I know I've said that before. And like when I start feeling like that, when I'm just absorbing things because I know I need to do that, that's a problem for me. And I don't want to play video games like that. I don't want to absorb TV and movies like that. And I need more rest and relaxation in my life. So I need to continue to balance that because I don't think this show is very casual and it's easy to do. But sometimes when we do Final Fantasy IV, that will come with many hours of preparation for it. And so it's a big we want to do it right. And I think that's probably
absolutely.
the differentiator. But I like this cadence. That's why I want to keep, continue to do the show. And I think the show could potentially live forever. Who knows? I'm not saying this is happening, so no one freak out. It could go to a monthly show or just when we want to do it. But I don't think the show will ever go away. And
That's good.
It's really going to be more about your schedule in the years to come in terms of what your demands are and your availability is, especially as you're doing more shows for us here too. So,
yeah, man. Yeah, it's a pleasure. I mean, Knockback stays a pleasure. I think that breathing room is good because sometimes we do an easy breezy, very conversational show like this, and then something that requires a little more time of us, like Final Fantasy IV coming up. And it's nice to have that give and take.
Yeah.
So it's not all, and it does avoid that trap of feeling like a media zombie, especially with things that are so special to us, like Final Fantasy IV. There's something that I learned though, Kyle, just in going out with you. I'm not sure if this is wrongheaded, but we did our RoboCop episode not too long ago. And that's been on the list for a long time, not because you and I were necessarily in love with it, but because that's a pop culture thing from the 80s, that nerd culture thing that just needs to be talked about at some point.
Certainly.
And on the cusp of the new video game, you thought it would be a nice tie-in, and I agreed. And of course it was, but there was something about the sentiment of you guys are idiots for not liking this as much as we like this that really gave me pause. And now I think about things for you and I anyway, like Star Trek, where I feel like I don't know if I could ever talk about Star Trek now, going in knowing full well that I'm not really a fan, right? And I like the red letter media-esque, not with Star Trek, because some of those guys love Star Trek,
exactly.
But I like the red letter media-esque thing of talking about something that necessarily we're not huge fans of and the problems we have with it, or growing up not liking it. This is why,
right,
compared to Star Wars, whatever. Versus, because I like the comedic aspect of that, but people take it really seriously. So there's that problem. But I like the contrast too of talking about things that we're going to gush about, like an old Star Wars film or, a Final Fantasy IV or Final Fantasy VII, something that we really love. I like having both things, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to ascertain if that's feasible or if people enjoy that. And maybe it's our fault because we kind of built up this thing with Knockback, not really on purpose, but we built up this thing where, of course, we're mostly 95% of the time talking about things that we really dig, or at least one of us really loves, and we're introducing the other person to it. So there's something going into 2024 where I'm trying to feel that out. And, you and I, of course, have to have that larger conversation. But there's something where I'm like, all right, how do we, do we stick with that? Or do we mostly talk about things that we're really in love with? I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is. I feel like I need to sleep on it a little more.
Yeah, I'm happy to do whatever. I mean, the hodgepodge nature means we can kind of do anything. We can even edit the shows differently in the future too, Like one of the things that I think really makes so the major reason we don't, well, there's two reasons. We don't edit our videos really because that's an expense. I mean, we can afford it, I guess, but it's not really necessary compared to how the videos do. And then the second thing, and this is a big reason we don't edit Sacred Symbols and the others, is because we just don't want any excuse to copyright strike or try to steal our revenue on YouTube.
Oh, right.
And it's not even, the reality is we make a fraction of our money on a small fraction of the money we make is on YouTube. It's like almost an irrelevant level of money in some months compared to the amount of money we bring in on Patreon and just through our endemic advertising stuff, which is much more lucrative, where it shouldn't really matter. But that's the reason, is that I don't want to fuck around with the deeply political, and I don't mean like, partisan politics, but the deeply political back end of YouTube where you have to know people and you have to fucking pull strings and people are just copyright striking you and sending you things and fucking with your, it's just,
sounds like
there's nothing that we do just because you use this or it's within a contested realm of fair use or whatever. But the edits could make the videos better too. So I have to think about all that stuff too. But I'm reminded about that specifically because Micah and I were hysterical laughing last night because we were watching this interview. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was the one of the co-creators of Chappelle Show. He does that podcast.
Neil Brennan.
Neil Brennan, right?
Yeah, I love him.
And he interviewed Carrot Top. Did you see this one?
I did.
Dude, I was dying. Like his story about Gallagher.
Dude, it's so good.
I was dying laughing because he was like, so he was dressed like Gallagher. Like like during this whole thing, and they do little spot edits in their videos where they show you what they're talking about. The same thing with, I watched that first episode of Tosh where he interviews his wife's gynecologist or whatever, which is
how
also
good is that show?
Yeah, it's hysterical. I think Tosh is really, really funny cat.
Dude, he is. I don't know. I always loved him, but I don't. Yeah, I was texting you last night. I was like, Tosh is 2 episodes into his new podcast, and I think it's the best podcast I've ever seen. Like, there's something about his charisma, his purpose. He has that Andy Dick energy of like purposely, like part of his image is being smarmy. Like, I was rich even before I was famous. Like, I grew up in the 1%. My parents were doctors, like unapologetically snobby. And that's part of his thing, but he's hilarious about it. And I just loved his stand up, but now he's bringing that energy to the podcast. And you could kind of see his humanity underneath too. Like, he actually seems like a nice dude, but he's putting up that obnoxious air. But there's also something about his charisma and his quickness. Like, I could see if Tosh was a little less polarizing of a personality, he would be very good for late night. Like, he's very quick. He's very Johnny on the spot. He knows the right questions to ask. He knows when to let the other person talk. Like, 2 episodes, I don't think I've ever been so impressed with a podcast. I was just like, holy shit. Not only is the idea great of this, like, I'm not having any famous people on this podcast. It's going to be like all just like regular people. There's something brilliant about that because he gets to shine too then, you know? But it doesn't look like he's trying to shine. You know, that I don't know.
Yeah, he's very natural. He's just naturally funny and witty. His dry humor is very right up my alley. So yeah, they do spot edits there too. So, but anyway, Dig, let's bail. Let's end with a dad joke like we always do.
Okay. All right. I got the dad joke cards here. I'm just shuffling. My Two Sons, right? That's what you think of when you see that? The intro of My Two Sons?
Yeah,
that's a dated reference.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, let's see. No, I think that's weird. That's like the one that's really weird. Okay. I don't think we did this one before. All right, Kyle. Little mail order humor for you here. Little e-commerce humor. What do you call 2 monkeys that share an Amazon account?
I don't know.
Prime mates.
That's great.
I hope we didn't do that one.
No, we didn't do that one. You never remember if we did the one or not. Like,
I can't. I should really just. What is so hard about just taking the one out of the?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that. It's like playing Trivial Pursuit. You take the card and you put it towards the back when you're done with it.
Yeah, like Trivial Pursuit.
Right.
I'm an idiot.
All right.
On that note.
Dig, have a good rest of your day. Happy Thanksgiving, although it will be after Thanksgiving by the time everyone sees this. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me here today. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. For all things Last Day Media, you know the drill. Patreon.com/Last Day Media for early ad-free access, etc. LastDayMedia.store for merch. Till next time. Goodbye.
Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.